Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. We are all locked down here in Melbourne, Australia, which is crazy. But yeah, I'm really happy and I'm doing something proactive. Doing my show here and listening to beautiful singers. And yeah. So how have you been? So how are you doing? What we gonna see? What we gonna hear tonight?
I'm good. I think we have a few hours to curfew, right?
I know.
It's I don't even know what time it starts. Is it 9 or 8?
I think
it's 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm going to play something inspired by Kurdish melody that I've learned from Said Farajpuri, my kamancha teacher in Iran. He lives in Canada actually now. So this is from his book, but I'm just kind of inspired by it. I'm going to play something around it.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, we can wait, please.
Worries.
Borna,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm doing really fine. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well, thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here actually on my show. We have been in touch over the past few months, and I couldn't wait to have you on my show. And there you go. So would you like to say hi to those who are watching us now and later?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be on the show, and it's been great being in touch with you over the last few months, and it's been really amazing sort of getting to understand what you're doing, and I'm so thrilled with this concept that you have, connecting people. And I know we talked about this, but I think it's great that other people sort of understand that I think it's great that you're putting people in touch with a wider audience, but I think as well what's great is the people that you're interviewing. You bring such happiness to us. And it's such a blessing to sort of, you know, to interact with you on to do something like this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to start my question, but before that, tell me about the country you were born. I knew you were born in Trinidad in the West Indies.
Mm-hmm.
So you're the first person ever who I've seen in my life from that country. Talk to me. Talk to me about the country, people, culture, and whatever you think probably might be interested for those who have never been in your country before.
So Trinidad is a twin island state. It's two islands, Trinidad and Tobago. It's a republic. It used to be a British colony, and it gained its independence in the 60s. And it has oil. So it unlike a lot of the other islands, it didn't have to rely on its forests for firewood. Trinidad also has an amazing resource called a pitch lake, which is a natural lake that is made of bitumen, and it keeps replenishing itself. So most of the tarmacs all across the world and most of the roads all across the world, their surfacing comes from Trinidad. It's an amazing island, and because it hasn't had to rely on its forests for firewood, it has almost sort of 90% of its virgin rainforest. And it's 10 degrees north of the equator, so it's right in the equatorial belt. So it gets like, you know, it gets like 32,000 milliliters of rainfall every year. It's insane. It has an amazing biodiversity, lots of hummingbirds, lots of endemic species. Historically, it was quite important as a geographical shipping point. It is the last shipping point from South America across to Europe, because it has a deep water harbor and a port. And you know, because it was British initially, so obviously because of the slave trade, you had native Indians, Caribs, and Arawaks, of which I have both in my blood. And then of course you had the English and the African slaves. So again, those two are in my blood as well. And then it sort of changed hands. It was Spanish first, and then it became British. And then after the emancipation of the slaves and the abolition of slavery in 1838, the island started to try and settle itself. But because it came to slavery fairly late, it had it needed more labor. So the governors instigated something called the Indentureship Act. And so these ships of people from India came because, of course, they were accustomed to the climate, and people from China. So I'm a quarter Chinese and African and two native Indian races and English and French and Spanish. And so it's really quite fascinating. And a lot of the people in the island are mixed. We have a really mixed culture, and we have great food. And just sort of 40 days before Lent, we have an astonishing carnival. And Trinidadians are very, very creative, and they're very musical. They do lots of design work. They make these amazing costumes every year. Wow, at the beginning of the sort of February, March, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. And of course, Tobago. So Tobago is the next island, which is only a 20-minute plane ride. So the plane does this, and you land in Tobago. The beaches are amazing. The food in Tobago is amazing. Trinidad is much more financial based. It's sort of one of the financial hubs in the West Indies, and Tobago is much more tourism based. So you have a really nice mix in the two islands. The people are lovely. They love food.
Here, so thank you very much for information. So
not at all.
You are the first calligrapher in my show, and it makes me happy that this calligrapher is popular and well-known calligrapher. So my first question for you is what does the calligraphy mean to you? And what is the magic in this that you have devoted your whole life to calligraphy and educating others over the past few years? Talk to me from the beginning.
Okay, so well, you know, I started calligraphy when I was 9, and I fell in love with it. I loved maps. I loved all botanical illustrations and all wildlife illustrations. And apart from the illustrations, you always had this beautiful script at the bottom. And then, of course, on the maps, you had these really, really lovely cartouches and lettering and illustration. And that really got me excited into lettering. But, you know, my first love of calligraphy started because I was, you know, my mother was, you know, she would always take us to the library, and we loved the library, and she really encouraged us to read. And I remember coming across, you know, I loved dinosaurs, and then I found out that the dinosaurs were killed by a meteor, and then I found that meteors exist in this sphere of study called astronomy. And you know, you're sitting in the library, leafing through Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, and it says, go to this. And then astronomy led to astrology, and astrology led to Egyptology, and that was it. When I saw Egyptian hieroglyphs, I freaked out. I couldn't believe that these things existed, and I was mental. I was like, can we go back to the library? And from Egypt, you know, I remember making the connection that hieroglyphs were not just pictures, they were writing. And also the connection of the maps and the writing on the maps, that was writing too. And, you know, this is a sort of precocious 9-year-old child just making this connection, going, how is this writing and how is this writing? And I've always been fascinated with how we get what is up here onto a piece of paper. That for me is insane, that we can take something that is in our mind, that's based on neurons firing and abstract, and manage to put it into or onto a physical surface. So for me, calligraphy isn't just about Western script, it's about all writing. You know, and I do this lecture where I do this talk where I cover 3,500 years of the Western alphabet in 45 minutes. Wow. And then I do an extended version of it, 3 hours, where it's much more detailed. And then I do a 6-hour version, which starts, you know, sort of in the Lascaux caves. And it's so exciting for me because it's not just about pretty writing. It's about mark making. It's about how the marks appear on the page. So that is my idea of calligraphy, which is very different to what calligraphy actually is. Calligraphy basically means beautiful writing, and it's generally about historical writing systems and how they're represented onto paper. And then in recent years, in the last sort of 10 years, you've had a resurgence of calligraphy, because you've had this explosion of tool manufacturing from really great companies like Pentel and Kurtaki and Tombow. And so all these tools are now available to help people write easier. You know, whereas before you needed a quill, you needed vellum, you needed ink. You have to mix everything up. You have to make sure you're not clumsy and knock over the ink on anything. And when you're cutting the quill, you don't want to slice your finger open. But now you can just buy a marker, it's filled, and you could just start writing. So that created a massive resurgence in calligraphy. And it's led to the development of another form of calligraphy called modern calligraphy, which is loosely based on traditional calligraphy. So calligraphy has grown so much over the last 10 years. And of course, you know, during lockdown, it's been really quite fascinating because lots of people have come to calligraphy because they found it very meditative. They found it very relaxing. You know,
that's what I was going to say. And my next question is very related to what you're saying. I don't know anyone else like you, and I don't know any other calligrapher in my life who is as determined as you. You studied letter form history at the Department of Typography and Graphic Communications, University of Reading, after being awarded one of the 10 art and craft scholarship. Why did you think you should learn calligraphy academically instead of like self-taught?
You know, I have a very good friend in New York who used to design for Tommy Hilfiger. And Emmett said to me one day, I was visiting New York. This was before I did the course at Reigate. And Emmett and I was doing some work, and you know when you've done your learning on your own for so long, and you know, growing up in Trinidad, nobody did calligraphy right. If you mentioned the word calligraphy, they would be like, "What? What are you talking about? What?" And so picking up something that was so rare to find in a developing country, you know, we couldn't afford the nibs. A nib was, you know, 25 pence, which was the cost of a bottle of beer.
Wow.
And you know, I remember going to my mother and saying, "Oh, I want some nibs," and she was like, "It's too expensive." And so I, you know, went to the library and I realized, oh, but you could cut quills. So I went down to the beach and got some quills from some turkey vultures, because, you know, and they were just soaking in the, because when you learn to cut quills, you have to soak them and you have to fill them with sand and heat them. And in Trinidad, they're sitting in the hot sand on the beach curing, right? So you just pick them up and cut them. So I sort of taught myself how to make tools and materials. And that gave me a really interesting approach to calligraphy. And once you sort of start learning how the tools and materials work, you then start to learn how to apply them in a traditional context. Now, Emmett I did my calligraphy and I was doing it and it was my calligraphy. And Emmett said to me, "I can see that you are talented. You are gifted." He said, "But nothing will prepare you for what a teacher can do for you. And a teacher will give you the skills to take that gift and turn it into something magical." And and he said, "You know, you enjoyed school," and I loved school. And he said, "Could you imagine not having a teacher at school?" And I started to think, maybe I do need to go and study this formally. And at Reading, I had some great teachers like James Mosley and Michael Harvey and Paul Luna, and just some amazing teachers who were internationally renowned in the field of typography. And they were like, "Oh, do this, do this, do this." And you know, I would always think, "Oh, why would you want to use a font if you could handwrite it?" Yeah. And James Mosley changed my life, and he made me see that every kind of lettering had its place in this under this big umbrella of letter forms. And so that was a huge revelation to me. And that got me really excited to learn more about the letter forms. And, you know, I love history. And I love to learn about where our craft comes from. So most calligraphers want to write. Right? And they want to write. That's all they want to do. They want to write. They don't want to learn about the writing.
Yes.
So paleographers and manuscript researchers want to learn about the writing, but they don't want to write. So I fell in love with this field called paleography, which is the study of the development of alphabets and scripts in manuscripts, and that sort of historical understanding has given me so much joy over the last 30 years.
Wow.
Because, you know, when you open a manuscript and you see these, you know, one of my best friends, she's the senior paper conservator at the V&A, and she'll call me and say, you have to come now. And it's because they've gotten something in. And the last time she called me, they had a manuscript that was this big. It was just that. And the writing was like, the writing was 0.5 millimeter in height. And like 23 lines of text in 2 columns with decoration. And you look at it and you're just spellbound. And it's that connection to the past that I find really amazing, that we can take something like that and translate it into the present and watch it touch people's hearts. Because calligraphy, when you're writing, you feel it around your heart. You feel the heart starting to get warm. You feel the heart starting to slow down, and you just feel this connection. Because of course, you know, cities would never exist if we didn't have writing. You know, in Sumeria, in Ur and Uruk, when the Sumerians started writing, that's why cities developed, because we had the ability for administration, for recording food, and for recording religion. So when you, as a calligrapher, when you connect to your calligraphy historically, you're not just connecting to what's on the page. You're connecting back through thousands of years of scribes, you know, all the way through Egypt, all the way through Sumeria, all the way through Mesoamerica, all the way through China and India. You're connecting to this web of historical collective consciousness that all humans belong to. And so when I write, I feel that. I feel that weight of connection. And you know, I've talked to people who watch me write, and they watch me write, and they say, you know, and before COVID, you know, I would be writing at an event, or I'd be writing somebody's name, and you know, they'd be standing right next to me, and their hand would be on my shoulder, and I'd feel them squeezing harder and harder, and I'm like, stop that, I'm trying to write. And they're like, sorry, and you look up and they're crying, and I'm like, are you all right? And they say, you know, I don't know what's come over me. I feel so emotional. I'm really sorry. And they're just crying, and they're not sad. They're just seeing their name written beautifully connects them to themselves, and they feel the love that they have for themselves. It's, oh, sorry, you know, I'm waffling on. It's so beautiful.
Oh, I love the way you're talking. I want to just throw my questions away and just talk. It's such a good information.
Don't throw the questions. Don't let me just ramble.
I want to get all my questions done. Behave. Right. Well, ever since I became acquainted with your work, one of the things I see in your work is coloring words. I mean, the feeling that is going to be seen from the letters or words. You show it with different colors, but not in the exaggeration or exaggerated way. I find it is very actually interesting. How did you come up with this creativity? You know what I'm talking about.
What about using the color?
Yeah, because you also convey through the coloring the words, and you just put a feeling on it.
Oh, right. Okay. So I don't really like color in my work because there's a really amazing calligrapher called Christopher Hannes, and I was in this class with Chris, and he said, if you can't write it in black, you don't deserve to write it in color.
Okay.
Because if you when you're practicing, you're working in black ink. I tend to use brown ink or sepia, and it's about the accuracy of the letter forms for me. It's about how do you get them to work accurately. Now, one of the things that color does is it hides the mistakes, and you don't want to hide the mistakes. You just want to correct them. And one of the reasons I love working in black ink and brown ink is because the manuscripts were written in black ink and brown ink. I tend to use, if I'm using color in my work, it tends to be materials that were used in the manuscripts, like ultramarine, which comes from lapis lazuli, which is this beautiful blue, minium, which is red, really lovely rich red, a sort of orange, which comes from vermilion, which is toxic because it's all these colors are toxic, by the way, except lapis, and then gold. Oh, to lay gold leaf is such a joy. And to use the same traditions that the monks use, and you're sort of connecting with the colors historically. But writing is generally done in black or brown, and so with it being in black or brown, I tend to do a lot of my practice in black ink or brown ink. Now, you have tons of inks available to us, and I work with so many suppliers, and I get tons of products, and so I get to test stuff. So usually, if you see me using color, it's because I'm testing a product. Now, coloring the writing comes from your heart. So when I'm writing, I let my emotions guide the tool. So I know that I love accuracy. So I'm aiming to write by touching the two lines. And if I'm doing copperplate script, I'm staying on the 55 degree. So those three things help me to structure the writing. So I don't have to worry about the heights of the letters or the angle. I just need to keep touching those lines. But the breathing. So when I teach copperplate script, I always tell students to inhale on the upstroke and exhale on the downstroke. And so the first problem that a lot of calligraphers have is they write too quickly. And two things are happening there. The first problem is the tool physically cannot do the work at the speed that you're working at. So you have to give the tool the time to do the work. The next thing is, if you're writing quickly, you're going, or you're holding your breath. So there's no exchange of air, and there's no interchange and exchange of potential energy to kinetic energy and back to potential energy. So when you're inhaling, you're preparing, you're stopping, and then you're exhaling. So when you're writing, you go up and you stop, and then you press, and then you come down, and then you go up. And so the breath helps to create color in the writing. So there's this amazing calligrapher called Hassan Masoudi, who is an Arabic calligrapher whose work I saw when I think I must have been about 7 when I saw his work. And he wrote this little tract in this book by Timms and Hudson that said, each breath is a distinct quanta of energy.
Of course, wow.
And I thought, so when we speak, we're speaking with these discrete quanta, these bits of energy. But we can't write at the rate that we're speaking at. But the rate that we speak at is rhythmic. So we can break down. So instead of using demi-semiquavers for speaking, you're using crotchets and minims for writing. So it's the same tempo, it's just longer notes. And it's all about breath. Because most people, so I'm really wicked to my students when I'm teaching. So I watch them and I'm looking at them and like, remember to breathe. And so they're like, yeah. And they're writing. And I say, so let's write I. So they write I. And so we write a couple lines of I. I say, okay, so let's write O. So we write some O's. I say, okay, so let's write man. Good. And let's write woman. Very good. Okay. And I'm watching them not breathing, right? So then I go, right, so let's write chrysanthemum. And they start writing. And you see them going blue in the face because it's a long word, right? And then they start to speed up to get to the end of the word. They get to the end of the word and they're like, and I'm like, okay, so is the beginning of the word better than the end of the word? And everybody's like, yes. And I'm like, that's because you were suffocating. And everybody sits back and they go, oh, and you have to breathe. And you have to breathe rhythmically because that breath is what, you know, when we inhale, we don't just inhale air. We draw energy from the universe around us. It goes into us.
Of course.
And when we exhale, that breath that we're exhaling is not just air, it's also energy. So that energy is poured into the writing. So if we're not breathing when we're writing, the writing becomes very stilted and very wooden. You know, one of the other things I do when I'm teaching is I sing. Oh, you don't know this, do you? So I
want to finish my question. I want to feel. I've got a lot of questions. I want to give everyone's break. So I want you to grab your camera and please give a tour because I love to see your studio and I'm sure lots of people actually now and later really enjoy it. Go for it. Don't go fast.
This is my studio. So I have a huge blackboard that I do work on. And so I teach here as well. So I have desks around the studio where I teach. They now have stuff on them, but normally this is where the students sit. And I teach up here. It's great working with chalk. I work with chalk from a company called Kitpas in Japan, and their chalk is made from crushed scallop shells. So these are some of the tools and materials that I have. So I use lots of quills and brushes. I'll get a little bit. I don't want to get too close because then you don't really see. You know, there's tons of brushes up there as well. Lots of pens. Lots and lots and lots of pens, and more pens. So there's a whole. So this is where I do a lot of my filming, and this is where the camera was set up. And I've been working on some 17th century letter forms. So I have 61 pages of them collated from old documents. I have one of the documents out. So this is, where is this from? 6th day of the 13th year in the reign of King George. In the year of our Lord, 1773. So 1773. So I have some great documents in the studio. I'm also really fortunate to have a nice big space to work in, but I also have a massive library. And here's my Arabic section. I love Arabic decoration. Here are my books on manuscripts and on writing, on the history of writing, and books on manuscripts all the way over there, heraldry and books on Egypt. So I studied Middle Kingdom Egyptian. I studied to translate Middle Kingdom Egyptian. And here are my pigments. So I sometimes grind pigments. There's a box of gold leaf. And then, you know, always repurposing stuff. So this used to be an old CD rack. And I tilted the shells so they're tilted downwards, so the ink's facing downward. And I have tons of nibs, and then I have a little kitchen. So every morning I come in and I make some fresh ginger and lemon tea. And then this is my massive plant chest, which I have lots of paper in. And there's more paper and more books and more So these are natural pigments. So there's some vermilion and some orpiment and malachite, lapis lazuli and azurite and my gilding section. And I have a little office. I'm not really going to show you the office, but I have to show you this. So I have 3 of these. So these are type cases filled with nibs.
Oh, wow.
So this is where I keep my nibs. Well, some of them. I have
I want to
tons
see more.
nibs.
That was very quick. I want to see more. Oh my gosh.
So there's hundreds of thousands of them all over the studio. So I mean, I have these ones here, but I also have more of them, all here, and in these little trays. I mean, so I bought these trays because they're for jewelry, right? and they're full of nibs. Yeah. So that's my little space.
Oh my god. So show me some of your stuff. That is there something that you're currently working on?
Mm-hmm. So let's just put this in here. So I recently worked on a project with Rodia, and we made these pads. I might need to show you this by holding it up. So I helped them with a project, and they asked me if I wanted anything. So Rodia is an amazing brand. They do great paper, and they said, "What would you like?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I would. I'm crying in this meeting, right?" I said, "I would love a pad with my grid on it." So I made this blue pad, which has an innovative grid that I developed, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. And they then asked me if I wanted anything else, and I generally ask for things that I can't find. So I knew that on the market there was no black paper with really fine lines. And of course, you know, Instagram is the most important thing, right? So the lines had to disappear.
Yes.
When you're writing on Instagram, right? So it looks like you're just writing without lines. And then I wanted a really nice gray pad with really fine lines as well, because I wanted people to start writing letters. So here are some letters. So I write letters.
Can you write something right now? Can you please write something on that black?
All right. So let me write on the white pad, because the black pad would mean mixing up color.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
I set the jig up, but I'd completely forgotten that it would be a split screen, so I didn't take that into consideration.
That's okay. That's all right. Is that my name?
That is your name.
I cannot read the first sentence.
So it says, "Thank you, Borna."
Ah, such a great surprise. I love that. Wow. Wow, wow. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. Thank you very much. Well, back to the question. Thank you very much, actually, for showing us your studio. And that was quite fascinating. I really appreciate that. I believe one of the fascinating part in your life is in 2003, you went to Egypt as the assistant archaeological illustrator for the Metropolitan Museum of Arts, New York, to copy hieroglyphs. And talk to me about that.
Oh, you know, I was going through a really, really bad patch in my life then, and I remember Julia. So I went to Reading for a year and I studied letterform history. Mm-hmm. Then I went to Reigate for 2 years and I studied calligraphy, gilding, and heraldic painting. So I studied to paint coats of arms and that kind of thing. And I won an award from the sort of 17th century company called the Worshipful Company of Scriveners. And so that was fascinating because that award, at the award ceremony, something led to the chief of the head of the Scriveners of the Crown Office asking me to come for an interview. So I still write. So there are 4 of us. We write some of the laws for the country on vellum. And so that happened, and then this thing happened that really sort of upset me. And then I was still studying. I went to study Arabic calligraphy, manuscript history, and archaeological illustration at Birkbeck. And the teacher at Birkbeck, she disappeared after a year. We didn't know where she went. We don't know what happened. And I learned so much from her. And on this course, she said to me, I've never seen somebody control a line the way you can. She said, this is a real gift that you have. And I was like, oh, thank you. But you know, when you're sort of depressed, you just can't deal with anything, right? And I just didn't think it was important. And so she calls me out of the blue, and I just came out of the shower. I'm in a towel. I'm still a little wet. And the phone rings, and I answer the phone. I said, hello. And she said, hi, Paul. And I said, hi. She said, it's Julia. I was like, Julia? Julia who? And she said, Julia Jarrett. I said, oh my gosh, how have you been? Where have you been? She said, oh, I was headhunted last year by the Met to come and head up the archaeological illustration team in the Egyptology department. And I was just wondering, you know, are you still freelancing? Now, I have no idea why she's calling. And I said, yeah, I'm still freelancing, still not very happy about life. So I'm like, yeah, I'm still freelancing. She said, do you think you could find 6 weeks to come to Egypt to draw hieroglyphs in a pyramid? I was like, what? Can I call you back? I said, I hung up the phone, and I'm like, what just happened? Oh my gosh, I must be going crazy. So I dry myself off and I get dressed and I call her back, and she says, so we're talking. And I said, well, you know, I'm not really in a good place right now. And she said, nothing will prepare you for being on a pyramid and watching the sun come up over the desert. It will change your life. She said, I know you're probably not in a good place right now, but you cannot pass this opportunity up. So I did some work. I went to the British Library, British Museum. I did lots of drawings of hieroglyphs, and I sent the work in. And she said, okay, so, you know, they've agreed to have you to come out. And it was really just, it was so beautiful. And, you know, working in Egypt with the hieroglyphs. And I was so connected to them. I could feel them sort of singing in me. And, you know, I excelled at working with them. And, you know, the dig Dieter looked at it, and Dieter said, this is really good work, Paul. And I then learned that quite a lot of people had come out before, and they couldn't finish the work because they didn't understand the line, they didn't understand how to use it, how to execute it. He said, you really have an affinity to these hieroglyphs. And I could feel my childhood connection. I remember opening the book in the museum, in the library, and just knowing the hieroglyphs. I could feel them. And so being in Egypt, and, you know, I gave up on Egyptology when I was 13. I thought, I live in Trinidad, I'll never get to Egypt. You know, what's the point in buying books on Egypt? And there I was in Egypt, working next to and in a pyramid. You know, and we went down, and, you know, Dieter said to me, oh, come, I want to show you something. We went down this rickety little ladder, this little hole. And, you know, if you were claustrophobic, there's no way you could do this. And then crawled, the hole to crawl through was about that. It was, you know, like 3/4 of a meter high, and, you know, 3/4 of a meter wide, and you're just crawling, and you're crawling, and then you're on this pristine floor. I've never seen stonework like this, and I was so amazed, and I mean, it was so insane. And every time I think about it, I get so emotional, because it really was a once in a lifetime experience. And, you know, and to work with people like Julia and Dieter and Adela Oppenheimer, who were so amazing, these amazing Egyptologists, who knew their stuff. And then Dieter saw that I was really connected to the hieroglyphs, and he said, I want to show you something that we just found. And they'd found this massive slab face down, and that's why it was saved, because it was face down. And it was this beautiful carving of the goddess Hapi. And it was a bas relief, right? But it was only this high.
Wow.
And you could see the eyelid and little eyelashes and just the surface. All of this was compressed down to like maybe 6 millimeters, but the detail, and covered in malachite. And then Dieter turned to me and he goes, okay, so don't cry on it. And Egypt was really just so special and so different, and I think because of you know, obviously I've been working, I'd trained as a scribe by then. I'd, you know, done my training, I'd done 4 years of study. I've been already doing work for clients like Joe Malone and the Crown Office, and you know, lots of big clients like Gucci, Saint Laurent, all these big clients I did all their work for, Asprey, and just really amazing clients. But doing this in Egypt was a very, very different thing. I could feel the connection with the scribes.
Yeah.
And it you know, I still think about it. And, you know, walking in the souk, and I found this little bookbinder who made these little books, and oh my God, it was, and the food, and just feeling the Nile pulling you. You know, if you stood in Egypt, in downtown Cairo, and you close your eyes, it's like a rope. The Nile just sort of lassos you, and you could feel it pulling, and you're like, oh, what is that? So beautiful, so beautiful. And Egyptians are really special. They are really, really special people. They have a very different connection to the earth.
Wow.
But, you know, equally, you know, lots of Arabs and lots of Indians and lots of Chinese people who live outside of the West are so connected to the earth. You can feel that connection they have, and there's so much love, and just, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience. It really changed my life.
I'm glad you shared your experiences, particularly about your experience in 2003. Paul, Antonio. We eventually made it. And as much as I want to continue have a conversation with you, I really enjoyed. I loved it, and thank you very much for accepting my offer being on my show. I really appreciate that. So before I'm gonna wrap it up, is there anything else that you want to say? And probably I didn't ask you.
So there's one thing that I want to say. You know, I know lots of people want to try calligraphy, and you know, lots of the tools and materials are not necessarily cheap. And the problem with cheap materials is you really struggle with the writing. But so I use, so this is a 6B pencil. So this is a Derwent 6B pencil. Lots of manufacturers like Faber-Castell or Staedtler or you know, lots of the manufacturers make higher grade pencils which are softer. So the B pencils are softer. And you can practice calligraphy with those B pencils. If you can't get B pencils, get 2 HB pencils and strap them together, and they act like the width of a nib. And so, you know, if you really want to try calligraphy, don't feel that you have to go out there and waste money on expensive materials. Just start off with the pencils, and you know, just if you're really up for it, you know, tag me in a post and I will have a look at the work. Because you know, and lots of calligraphers are happy to help people. So don't feel that you are, you know, just struggling on your own. Thank you, Borna. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and for your patience.
I enjoy having conversation with you, and I wish and I hope to meet you one day in real.
Oh, definitely.
Any one of my guests.
I will definitely cook for you.
I love what you do. I'm so proud of you and being so privileged having you on my show. And I'll catch you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You take care. Bye.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.